Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi. Looks like you're in London. Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Abati. Yes, I'm in London. I saw all of the fun you guys had in Lagos on Christmas Day. What a wonderful show you guys did. A huge congratulations to you all and a very Merry Christmas. I hope you all had a wonderful Christmas. Tell me, what did you eat? What did you eat? Let me hear.
Good morning, Adefemi. Merry Christmas. We definitely missed you yesterday. We had nice sandwiches on location, but at home, obviously, we had so much to eat, jollof rice, everything you can think of that should be on the Nigerian Christmas table. I hope you had a great one too.
Yes.
Femi.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much, Ayo.
Femi, I'd like to ask.
And tell me, Rufai, let's hear it.
How was Mom's moi moi yesterday?
Yeah.
Your mom's moi moi. Moi moi, yeah, Femi.
It was delicious. It was delicious. I'm going to send you a video as soon as I come off air. I'm going to send you a video. It was delicious. You know, they wrap it in the leaves.
Yeah.
So it gets that scent. It was wonderful. I can't express it. But thank you so much. Let me tell you about what is happening around the world. Now, despite the festivities, despite the happiness that we've been seeing around the world, clearly there are still issues and parts of the world that weren't really celebrating this festive period. Let's start in Syria, where the forces of Tahrir al-Sham, who are the forces that were largely behind the toppling of President Bashir al-Assad earlier this month. They say that 14 of their officials have been killed in clashes between them and forces that are loyal to the toppled president. Now, if we take a look at this situation, it is one that kind of highlights the volatility that we're seeing in the Middle East that we saw throughout this year, to be honest. But at the very beginning of this conflict, or at the very beginning of the news breaking of Assad's toppling, of his ousting, there was, if you can call it, the audacity of hope. Perhaps people felt that with his coming away from this political scene in Syria, there was the hope that perhaps democracy would fill this vacuum. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the immediate case. So what we have are the officials behind his toppling continuing to face clashes with forces that are still loyal to Bashir al-Assad in so-called revenge attacks. So they had 13 to 14 people killed and an additional 10 people also injured because of this spate of so-called revenge attacks. Now, when we're looking at the direction of these revenge attacks, they are coming from the Alawite community. Now, if you look at Islam, it's a very rudimentary or very, very basic description, but essentially Islam is broken down into two denominations, if you can call it that, the Sunni Muslims and the Shiite Muslims. And the Alawite community that we're talking about, they're a subsection of the Shiite community, which Bashar al-Assad is a part of, and those forces remain loyal to him to this day. So as we already highlighted, as much as people can hope for peace in Syria, clearly that's not going to be the immediate reality with so much fighting going on and so many people fighting for power in light of Bashir al-Assad's ousting. Let's move on to Africa now. And in Mozambique, which we have also talked about quite openly, especially in light of their elections, firstly, the time it took for the political or the president to be announced, and then the post-election violence that we've been seeing thereafter. Now, on Christmas Day also, there was a huge prison riot at the central prison in the Mozambican capital of Maputo. And it is believed that some 20 people were injured in that prison riot, which is still very, very volatile at this moment. 33 people killed, more than 20 people injured, and we do know that more than 1,000 prisoners were able to break out of the confines of the prison during the riots, but some 150 have been apprehended and are still in detention. But clearly there's a disparity in the numbers. So we've been listening to what the Justice Minister in Mozambique had to say, and she described the situation as having nothing to do with the post-election violence and protests that were taking place on the streets of Maputo and in wider Mozambique, and said that this riot started within the prisons for completely different reasons. That being said, there's clearly a lot of unrest happening in southeastern Africa. And don't forget, Mozambique is also currently reeling from the effects of Cyclone Trudeau, especially because it has such a long coastline. So in addition to the effects of this natural disaster, the resources and of course the authorities, especially in the center of the country, the capital itself, are focused on what this prison riot means for security in the country. And lastly, because we can't ever talk too much about the world without talking about Donald Trump and what he's got to say in light of his re-election and his pending inauguration. But he, in a post on Truth social media platform, talked about how he met with NHL, which is the National Hockey League, spoke with Wayne Gretzky. He's a fantastic athlete, very, very popular, very, very successful. And essentially in Donald Trump's post on Truth, he talked about how, forget, calling him Governor Gretzky, that perhaps people in Canada should prepare to look at him as Prime Minister, and essentially threw his weight behind Wayne Gretzky being the next Prime Minister of Canada. Wayne Gretzky clearly has not bit at that. He didn't respond positively to it. But we know that the real reason why Donald Trump is making these types of comments is because he's still in this dispute, this spat with Justin Trudeau, who actually is the Prime Minister. And what's interesting is that in addition to Trump sending threats his way, we do know that Justin Trudeau is also not having the best time in power. His finance minister did resign as a sign of no confidence, and also opposition voices in Canada are capitalizing over that shakiness and the lack of confidence there is in Justin Trudeau at the minute and calling for him to step down. So again, a very interesting state of the world, from Syria to the African continent and to the United States. I'd love to hear your thoughts before we go on to the papers.
Real quickly, Femi, the fears we had about Syria is finally coming to be. Because before now, the civil war was a sectarian and ethno-religious battleground. During the civil war, it was the Alawites versus the Sunnis, some Shiites in there, some Uyghur Muslims in there, some Kurds in there, some Druzes in there, and a couple of many other groups. In fact, some Caucasians, because Syria split across many ethno-religious lines. And that is what is happening. And this is, you're even reporting an isolated incident. In fact, since this HTS did take over, you've been having many incidents like this, and they've been attacking the Alawites. Why are they attacking the Alawites? And the Alawites are a very interesting group. Some people don't even think they're Muslim enough. So when you even address them as a section of the Shia, some people feel they're not Muslim enough because they also have a couple of Christian traditions and rituals that they also perform. So the Sunnis are very hard line, but the Shias definitely would take them in. That's why you said that you had some support with Hezbollah and Iran and all of that. But what is now happening is that from place to place, Latakia, or a couple of other areas, they are now going to fight these Alawites because they dominated power when Bashar al-Assad was there. And Bashar al-Assad didn't put them in strategic ministries, and they did have the power. So you're having a free-for-all happening. If something is not done, if this present HTS administration does not quickly return Syria to the part of elections or to a part of a consultative body where they can determine how the future of Syria is going to be, then the fears are beginning to emerge. Also, the other fears we're having that it will not be a scramble among the terrorist groups, because this is just a fraction of one of the terrorist groups that are funded by other people and all of that. In fact, it's so funny that since 2013, Israel had been planning for a day that Syria is going to fall apart, and they were already doing some work with the Druze around the Golan Heights region. So it's a mixed bag, and we should be careful. As for Trump, hope if the world is seeing Trump now interfering in the politics of another sovereign nation, because Americans are so hypocritical to say, oh, they are interfering in our own politics, no interfering for a foreign nation. Trump is doing this because Trudeau is standing up to him. And he keeps making this very uneducated statement because he doesn't know that before you be the Prime Minister of Canada, you have to be the leader of the party. You have to go through the party system. Wayne has not gone through the party system. You're just saying because it favors you. And he keeps calling Canada, 52nd American state.
The 51st state.
You are saying that for a sovereign nation,
yes,
which is an aberration. I think somebody has to report him to the United Nations at some point. The Canada you're putting on their parade is an over $2 trillion economy. It's not a small economy. And you keep saying these things, and because the world cannot tackle you because the standard has just been raised so low for Trump. So he can say all the stupid things and get away with it. If another person says it now, the world will be up in arms.
I think what I'll say is that the next 4 years will certainly be an interesting one, following his inauguration on the 20th of January, 2025. I don't know how many leaders would make the statements that soon-to-be President Trump makes and gets, and would get away with it so easily. Beyond trolling Canada as the 51st state in America, he's even asked that he would keep Justin Trudeau on as governor. He shouldn't worry about his position. He won't be prime minister, but he'll be governor of the 51st state of Canada, part of the United States of America. And if that's not offensive to Trudeau himself, it should be offensive to the Canadian people. He said that, the taxes are too high in Canada, and he promises that if he were president, if they would agree to join the United States of America to become the 51st state, he would reduce taxes by 60%. This is following his threat to increase tariff on Canada imported goods to the United States of America, including that of Mexico and China, saying that at least China was responsible for some of the drug challenges that they have in the United States of America. Now, despite that, Justin Trudeau went to his Malago estate to have a meeting with him. So he's extended that diplomatic olive branch, if I could put it that way. But following that meeting, Trump went on his Truth Social platform to say that, they had a good meeting and they were in conversations, he wants to work with Trudeau. And then he goes back to begin to make statements like that and even push candidates forward, saying that when he proposed it to Matt himself, Matt said he wasn't interested, but that the people of Canada should raise a campaign, and it would be interesting to see. If this were from a casual citizen, you wouldn't even give it to a second thought. But it's coming from President Trump. Exactly. It's big. It's a huge statement. It's borderline. It's borderline. Were able to cause a diplomatic row between the two countries, and they've enjoyed very good relationships diplomatically. That's the United States of America and Canada. So even though it might be all fun and laughs and jokes, it is serious. He is president. In fact, when he becomes president of America, when he's sworn in, he's going to be perhaps the most powerful man on planet Earth. So he needs to be careful about statements he makes. It's very interesting when he makes statements like that. But Mozambique, let me go to Mozambique and the jailbreak. About 1,530 people have been said to have, escaped from the prison, and 150 people will be captured. Yes. However, what has been said, like you mentioned rightly, is that there's civil unrest brewing in the nation, and so attention must be paid there because of what happened in the elections. And it just again spotlights what happens when elections are not run properly. You have issues that run months and months, even perhaps years, and sometimes you have a situation on your hands that you cannot control with the people, things just going awry. It takes me back to some of the jailbreaks that have happened in Nigeria. Benin jailbreak, I don't know what has happened since then, if they've recaptured the people who they said were investigating, but these are the kind of situations that we find and continue to see on the African continent. I don't know if they're going to be able to get back 1,400 people back into jail, following that jailbreak. We'll watch and see what the authorities or the government has to say about this.
Okay, let's start with Mozambique. Now, Mozambique held elections in October, and the elections were disputed. Madeleine, who is the main rival, the leader of the main opposition party, rejected the results of that election. Ahead of the election, his lawyer was killed, his main campaign organizer was also killed, and we had also suspected before the election that that election would not be free and fair, that Frelimo would try to hold on to power. As it turned out, Daniel Chapo, 47-year-old Daniel Chapo, a candidate of Frelimo that had been in power since 1975, was declared the winner of that election with about 71% of the votes. But Madeleine said no, he would not accept the result. He will go to court, and he actually went to court. Now this week, on Monday, the Constitutional Court now decided that Daniel Chapo of Frelimo actually won the election, but they revised the outcome. They now gave him 71%, they reduced to 65%. And they gave Madeleine, 24%. Mondlane is in exile now in an unknown country, wherever. And from exile, he has been encouraging his supporters to go to the streets, to demonstrate. So the Vincentius Mondlane factor is part of the major factor in the electoral process in Mozambique, post-election. And he says he will install himself as president on 15th January, when Mozambique is going to do the inauguration of the new president. How he's going to do that, we do not know. Whether he will come from exile or he will use some other method, but he says he rejects the result, he rejects the decision of the Constitutional Court. Now, Mondlane is supported mainly by young people, and that's why, immediately after the Constitutional Court ruled, the youths went onto the streets, and they freed prisoners, 1,500 of them. 150 have been, rearrested. But since that election in October, 150 persons have died in Mozambique as a result of election. And this has to do with electoral systems. When we talk about elections, we talk about the possibility of violence in Africa. Pre-violence, election violence during the votes, and after. Mozambique presents a very serious demonstration of how there could be an outbreak of violence after elections. That's the situation they have now. This week, businesses have been shut down, banks have been looted, shops have been looted, persons have stayed home. They don't know it's Christmas in Mozambique, especially in Maputo, the worst civil unrest crisis that they have had since that country became, free in 1975. As for Syria, I spoke about Syria yesterday. And I said that Syria is an ethnically, diverse country. You have the Assyrians, you have the Kurds, you have the Druze, you have the Alawite, you have, different groups. Sunni Arabs, you have them there. But that country, the only thing that is certain in Syria today is uncertainty. Uncertainty is the only thing that is real. Now, what's his name? Al-Sharara or Al-Jolani, leader of the ATS that, ensured the fall of the Assad regime. The 54-year-old Assad regime, Bashar al-Assad is now in Russia, Moscow. Now, the main issue is this. How do you get the various rebel groups to come together? The Kurds backed, the Iranian backed, the ones that are based in the country, and then how do you ensure unity within the country? And then how do you address the influence of Israel that wants to establish itself concretely as the major dominant group in the Middle East? These are the three challenges that they face. Now, Ajolani has said, they will unite minority forces. On Tuesday, a Christmas tree was burnt, and that led to riots, to protests. Now, after that, Alawite shrine was burned down in the central city of Homs. Now, Bashar al-Assad, the Assad family, they are Alawites. So there is also that religious dimension to that crisis. And you had, crisis, protests, not just in Homs, also in the hometown of the Assads, in Qatada, and also in Latakira. So this is the big problem that they have. Would they remove al-Assad and be able to hold the peace? As for Donald Trump, I think he's basically trolling Canada and trolling Prime Minister Trudeau, whom he says is the governor of Canada. You recall that Trudeau visited him in Mar-a-Lago, and after that, he started referring to Canada as the 51st state. And he says they will reduce taxes, but they will also make sure that Canada becomes militarily protected. In other words, Trump just being himself. He will not be the one to determine the future of the democracy in Canada. So I think in that regard, he's overreaching himself, whether he thinks an ice hockey star should be the next prime minister or the governor of Canada. But you are going to get a lot more of that. When Trump ascends the throne, let's say the throne, on January 2025. But that's just about Trump, again, overreaching himself and being, well, I don't want to use a negative word, but sovereignty of Canada does not lie in the hands of Donald Trump.
Exactly that. Well, thank you very much for all of your great analysis on the World Brief. Let us look at the newspapers now. Now, the newspapers, today being Boxing Day, they're a bit light when we're looking at the Nigerian space, but 2 Nigerian papers have actually released editions. Let's first take a look at the front page of The Punch. Now, The Punch looks this morning at the recent stampedes across the country, and in a somewhat positive spin on it, their headline talks about how fun seekers still chose to come out into large public spaces, public gatherings in different parts of the country, in the FCT, in Lagos, in Port Harcourt. People still are being able to make the most of the festive period despite the awful news of the stampedes happening in Ibadan, in Abuja, and also in Anambra just this month alone, even in the past week or so. So that is, of course, a nod to what we've been already seeing. But if you keep your eyes on the picture headline story on the front page of The Punch, you can see that it has featured the unfortunate crashing of the Azerbaijan Airways. Unfortunately, 38 people lost their lives in that crash on Christmas Day. But if there is any positive that you can take from this awful situation, it is that there are 29 survivors who have essentially survived that plane crash. So just a teeny weeny silver lining on that awful tragedy. So that's the front page of The Punch. And our other Nigerian paper this morning is the Daily Trust. And unfortunately, insecurity is rearing its ugly head. You have all spoken at length about this disparity, about the Nigerian armed forces and whether or not they had credible intelligence. There are people who have been killed, 10 villages, at least 10 villages in Sokoto, killed by those airstrikes. And also that we know in terms of the insecurity and the fighting that has been attributed to Lakurawas, there's also been an upturn in attacks that have been affecting different parts of Nigeria's north and northeast. That I already mentioned that there has been some back and forth, as we can see, in terms of the credibility of the intelligence the Nigerian forces got before they dropped those airstrikes. Unfortunately, they were told and they had credible information that it was Lakurawa's targets that they were targeting. Unfortunately, as we're hearing, civilians, innocent villagers were affected. So a terrible story happening there. And just to reiterate the issues that we're seeing in Nigeria in terms of insecurity, we do know that a suicide bomber in Borno has also killed 2 people. It's quite a sobering reality on Boxing Day. But let's move on to Kenya's Daily Nation. And unfortunately, it looks at the disparity between the population in the country and how people are celebrating Christmas. You've got the affluent, you've got the political elites, you've got the elite in class being able to have a quintessential, extravagant Christmas. And as you can see on the front page are images of the Daily Nation of Kenya. You've got people who are on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, facing despair and economic constraints. Let's take a look here to the United Kingdom and pull up the Daily Express this morning. Now, we do know that King Charles delivered his Christmas address. Sandringham was definitely the host for the Christmas Day service at Mary Magdalene's Church in Sandringham. And we got to see King Charles, Camilla as well, also the Prince and Princess of Wales, both of them being able to make appearances. At the very beginning of the year, there was a lot of uncertainty about the state of their health, both of them dealing with cancer diagnoses earlier this year, but both of them clearly healthy enough and happy enough to make it their business to make this public appearance on Christmas Day. But staying with the Daily Express, there is also the fact that, as I'm sure you all know, Boxing Day is traditionally a very big day for shopping in the United Kingdom. You're supposed to have great sales, and many retailers are hoping that people will come out in their droves to spend, and hopefully offset some of the losses retailers have had to face with the coming of this new Labour government. with the coming of Rachel Reeves and her bumper budget, and of course the heightened taxes that many retailers are having to face, especially when it comes to national insurance contributions. So many people, especially in those entrepreneurial, those business spaces, are hoping that the British people, the tourists in the United Kingdom, come out and spend. And then finally, on the front cover of the Eye, it also looks at Labour and Labour's contribution so far. Staying with the ruling party, Labour is facing growing threat as voters are shifting away from Labour and looking towards Reform UK. So very, very interesting times ahead.
Okay, I think one other story that's making the rounds in the UK this morning is the hypocrisy of the Church of England.
Yeah.
Justin Welby left after that sexual scandal because it was revealed that he shielded the priest that was abusing people. The man that will take over for him in the interim, when he finally leaves, is a man called Cottrell.
Yes, the Archbishop of Canterbury, yes.
He too has been found out to be shielding another priest or another, man of God that was abusing people.
Abusers within the church, yes.
Within the church.
Yes.
So that's a big story. In fact, LBC, leading Britain's conversation, was talking about it this morning. And the same Justin Welby had the temerity to come yesterday on Christmas Day to be telling us about the love of Christ. Didn't this former oil tycoon, because he was in the oil sector and he walked around here in Nigeria at some point in the past, that's why he's very good friends with Buhari, didn't he know that the love of Christ should bring boldness to speak up against your fellow priest that is abusing people in the church? Didn't he know that the love of Christ is to bring boldness to call a spade, despite the fact that it will concern you? So they are talking about the love of Christ today, giving us Christmas sermons, when they were shielding people from abusing people. And those people that have been abused, because they are not high up there in the church hierarchy, they can go and die. They make this our love of Christ hypocritical sometimes. I think that's one of the biggest stories in England this morning, and that is what is reflective of the Church of England and their preaching on Christmas Day. I just hope Justin Welby will go and sit for repentance.
All right, let me come home to Nigeria. Two stories. First of all, the Punch newspaper. I'm very glad that they've been able to keep the Christmas spirit up and high with their front page news, despite very sad stories across the world, including that airplane crash in Kazakhstan from Azerbaijan, traveling from Azerbaijan. Really sad story there. But like you said, a little light, a little ray of hope in there is that we had some survivors. There's been a video trending with the passenger on plane who had recorded last moments just before the plane crashed and sent to his wife, and just to see the horror on people's faces, on such a day like that. But beyond that, it was great to see, if you read the article by The Punch as to what's happened in different parts of Nigeria and how people celebrated Christmas from Abuja to Enugu, Lagos, that despite how tough things have been for people, a lot of people still try to make the best use and create memories with their family members. And kudos to those areas where they were able to give concessions, reduce prices to enable families come in. A few places were mentioned in Abuja. In Lagos, some people still took advantage of the season to hike prices, making it more difficult for people to actually enjoy it. But it was great to see. Something else that was pointed out through the interviews by the Punch newspaper of the people who had gone to these places is that there was actually a real concern around crowd and crowd control. So some people said they were reluctant to bring their children, but when they saw that, okay, the crowd wouldn't be too much. Of course, right. Following the recent news of stampedes across, the 3 locations in the country, you wouldn't be surprised as to why parents are a bit reluctant if they see a huge crowd somewhere. But it's still good to see that despite it all, people still try to make the best of the day and give their children, their family, a good and memorable experience on Christmas Day. And that's why yesterday I said that I salute the Nigerian people. I salute the Nigerian spirit for being resilient, never shaken by a lot of things that are happening, and just to say well done to everyone. And we keep the hope alive. We keep moving until things change.
It would seem to me that the most important story today would seem to be that today is the 20th anniversary of the tsunami. The tsunami, I think one of the UK newspapers is talking about that today, that engulfed the Indian Ocean.
Up on the Guardian.
The Indian Ocean and covered about 12 countries and resulted in the death of about 228 persons. In the islands of Andaman and Nicobar alone, over 7,000 persons lost their lives out of the 228. Nature suddenly rising. You know, those two islands, Andaman and Nicobar, about 100 kilometers from the epicenter of the sea. And, you know, in that axis, a beach that had been declared by Time magazine as the best beach in the world suddenly erupted in chaos, with water rising about 49 feet, 15 kilometers high, and then, you know, resulting in devastation, destruction, and people, you know, not just having their communities destroyed, also having post-tsunami crisis, and the entire world caught in, you know, this crisis of nature versus man. So it's been 20 years. It was Boxing Day, 2004, and many of the affected families would probably today also be agonizing and remembering that horror. And also the survivors will be telling stories of survival. So that's a classical story that I think we should remember every Boxing Day. The other story from England is not just Princess of Wales, Kate Middleton, you know, appearing on some of the front pages, looking very cheerful to our fans and serving as an inspiration to, you know, the British community. But more importantly, the speech delivered by the King Charles III, his third since he became king, at the Forsovia Chapel, a former hospital that has now been turned into a sacred site, more or less on television. And what was the king telling us basically? He was thanking the community for supporting him, nurses and doctors who helped his family through the uncertainties and anxieties of illness. Now, you recall that in February, he has been undergoing chemotherapy, you know, for cancer, having been diagnosed for cancer. The same also with the Princess of Wales, Kate, who had a major abdominal surgery and who also had to go in for chemotherapy. The Queen, Queen Camilla, has had to also suffer bouts of pneumonia. The Princess Royale had a head injury as a result of an accident involving, you know, a horse. And so that family, it's been a very tough year for them. And the king focused on that, thanking everybody for supporting him. And this is a man who has been commended for being very stoic, you know, carrying himself well in the face of all these challenges. He projected that, and that's leadership. He also talked about the conflicts in the world, in Africa, in Central Europe, and in the Middle East. He talked about forgiveness, the spirit of forgiveness and of reconciliation, of togetherness and unity. And it will seem, in my view, that King Charles III, you know, gave a very robust Christmas message that, you know, showed leadership and that addressed the concerns that he is also addressing at a very personal level. It was a very personal Christmas message, but beyond that, he also saved time to reflect on the situation of the world. In 2025, we hope that it will be a better world. We hope, with the United Nations having been reduced to a completely toothless bulldog. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Adefemi. Always great seeing you. Enjoy leftover from Christmas Day. We know sometimes it tastes even better than the day itself. We'll take a short break now.
On day two,
yeah.
Absolutely.